John is seriously ill and needs someone with medical training to care for him. We need to postpone the wedding. My girlfriend said this 3 weeks before our ceremony. I asked one simple question. What does his vacation schedule look like? And everything started unraveling. I am Miles, 35M, general contractor in Minneapolis. Been with Lindsay, 32F, for 14 months, engaged for the last 8. She is a pediatric nurse at Children's Minnesota, and I thought I had found someone who understood commitment and taking care of people. Lindsay has twin boys with her ex-husband John, Tyler, and Cameron, both 8 years old. She divorced John 2 years ago because of his controlling behavior, but they share custody every other week. I have always respected that arrangement and tried to be supportive of her co-parenting situation. We met at a neighborhood BBQ last summer. I was helping the hosts fix their deck railing when Lindsay came over with her boys, asking if they could watch me work. They love construction stuff, she said. Always building things with Legos. I ended up spending an hour showing Tyler and Cameron how to use a level and measure angles. Lindsay was impressed that I took time to explain things properly instead of just telling them to stay back. Most guys don't have patience for kids, she said later when we exchanged numbers. Our relationship developed naturally. I appreciated her dedication to her work and her kids. She seemed to value my steady approach to life and the fact that I had built my own successful contracting business from nothing. When I proposed last February on her birthday, she cried and said she would never felt so secure and loved. We planned an October wedding at a venue overlooking Lake Minnetonka. Nothing fancy, just 80 people, mostly family and close friends. My mom was flying in from Oregon. Lindsay's relatives were driving up from Iowa. Everything was locked in: venue, catering, photographer, the works. Then last Tuesday night, Lindsay got a call from John's mother while we were reviewing final headcount numbers. What? When did this start? Lindsay's voice immediately shifted into nurse mode. Is he eating? What about his medication levels? I could only hear her side of the conversation, but her expression grew more concerned by the minute. Of course, I understand. He needs someone who knows what to watch for. I will be there first thing tomorrow. When she hung up, Lindsay looked genuinely distressed. John's having a serious flare-up of his chronic condition. His mom says he can barely get out of bed and he is not eating properly. She is too old to care for him properly, and she is worried about leaving him alone with the boys. What kind of condition? I asked. Autoimmune disorder. It affects his joints and energy levels. He has been managing it for years, but sometimes it gets really bad, and he needs monitoring to make sure he doesn't dehydrate or have complications. I felt sympathy for John, despite our complicated history. Nobody deserves to be seriously ill. That sounds rough. What can we do to help? Lindsay took a deep breath. Miles, I need to ask you something difficult. I think we need to postpone the wedding. My stomach dropped. Postpone? For how long? I don't know. John needs 24-hour care right now, and I am the only person with medical training who can properly monitor his condition. His mom cannot handle it, and we cannot afford private nursing care. But the wedding is in 3 weeks. Everyone's already made travel arrangements. We have got deposits on everything. I know, and I am so sorry. But John is the father of my children. If something happens to him because I wasn't there to help. She started crying. I couldn't live with myself. I understood her concern, but something about the timing felt off. John had been managing this condition for years, according to Lindsay. Why was it suddenly critical right before our wedding? What exactly are his symptoms right now? I asked. Severe joint pain, fatigue, nausea. His mom said he hasn't left his bedroom in 3 days, and his doctor thinks he needs 24-hour monitoring. Lindsay paused. Well, we haven't talked to his doctor yet, but based on what his mom described, it sounds like a serious flare-up. That is when I asked the question that started everything. What does his vacation schedule look like right now? Lindsay looked confused. What do you mean? I mean, if he is too sick to get out of bed, he is probably not going to work. Did he call in sick or is he using vacation time? Miles, why does that matter? He is ill. It matters because sick leave and vacation time are handled differently by employers. If he is genuinely having a medical emergency, there would be documentation. Lindsay's face flushed. Are you seriously questioning whether John is actually sick? What kind of person do you think I am? I think you are someone who wants to help people, especially your kid's father. I just want to make sure we understand the situation before we cancel our wedding. I cannot believe you are being so heartless about this. But I wasn't being heartless. I was being practical. Something about this whole situation didn't add up, and I had learned to trust my instincts when it came to construction projects and life decisions. The next morning, Lindsay packed a bag and drove to John's house to assess the situation. She called me that afternoon to confirm that yes, he was very sick, and yes, she needed to stay to monitor him. How long are we talking? I asked. I don't know. Miles. These flare-ups can last weeks. I cannot set a timeline on someone's health. That night, I called my buddy Rex, an electrician who had worked on several projects with me. Rex has a gift for seeing through bullshit, both in construction and in life. Brother, you need to do some homework, Rex said after I explained the situation. This smells like manipulation to me. You think John's faking being sick? I think John's probably got some aches and pains, but I bet he is playing them up to get your girl back over there playing house. And if she is willing to cancel your wedding for him, maybe she is not as over that relationship as you thought. Rex was right about one thing. I needed more information before making any decisions about our future. What I discovered the next day changed everything I thought I knew about Lindsay's relationship with her ex-husband. Update 1. My phone died yesterday, and I had to get a new one at the store, which is why I couldn't update sooner. Thanks to everyone who said I wasn't crazy for questioning the timing of this medical emergency. So Wednesday morning, I decided to do some research. I know John works as an insurance claims adjuster for a company downtown. I looked up their main number and called, asking to speak with John Foster about a claim. I am sorry, Mr. Foster is out of the office this week, the receptionist said. He is using vacation time. Would you like to leave a message? Vacation time? Not sick leave, not medical leave, vacation time. I sat in my truck for 10 minutes processing that information. If John was genuinely having a medical emergency requiring 24-hour monitoring, wouldn't he be on medical leave? Why would someone use precious vacation days to be bedridden with autoimmune symptoms? That afternoon, I drove past John's house, not to spy exactly, but to see if there were any signs of the serious medical situation Lindsay had described. The house looked normal. No medical equipment deliveries, no visiting nurses, no family cars indicating a health crisis. But I did see Lindsay's car in the driveway at 2 p.m. on a Wednesday, when she should have been at work. I called her that evening. How is John feeling today? A little better, but still very weak. I am monitoring his fluid intake and making sure he is eating small meals throughout the day. Did you have to call in sick to work? I took some personal days. This is important, Miles. I am sure it is. When do you think you will know more about his timeline for recovery? I cannot put a deadline on someone's health, she said, sounding irritated. I thought you understood that. After we hung up, I called Rex back. Dude, something's definitely off here. I told him about John taking vacation time instead of sick leave. That is interesting. You know what else is interesting? This is the third time in 2 years that John's had a medical emergency, right when Lindsay was about to take a big step forward. What do you mean? Remember last spring when Lindsay was going to take that charge nurse position? Suddenly John needed help managing his condition and couldn't handle the kids on his regular custody days. She turned down the promotion. I did remember that. Lindsay had been excited about the leadership opportunity, then suddenly decided it would be too stressful with John's health issues. And remember when Lindsay was looking at apartments in that nicer neighborhood last summer, right before she was supposed to put in an application. John had another flare-up and needed extra help with the boys. My stomach was sinking as the pattern became clear. Rex, you think John's been manipulating her this whole time? I think John figured out that your girl has a savior complex, and he knows exactly which buttons to push to keep her tied to him. And now that you two are about to get married, he is pulling out all the stops. Thursday evening, I decided to test a theory. I drove past John's house around dinner time, just to see if anything looked like a medical emergency situation. What I saw through the front window stopped me cold. Lindsay was in the kitchen cooking dinner while John sat at the table reading a newspaper. Tyler and Cameron were at the counter doing homework. It looked like a normal family dinner scene, not like a medical crisis requiring professional nursing care. John didn't look bedridden. He didn't look weak or nauseated. He looked like a guy reading the news while his ex-wife made dinner. I sat in my truck for 20 minutes, taking photos with my phone and trying to process what I was seeing. This wasn't emergency medical care. This was Lindsay playing house with her ex-husband while our wedding preparations sat abandoned. When Lindsay called me that night, she sounded tired. "How was John today?" I asked. "Still struggling, but I think the worst is passing. I made him some soup, and he was able to keep it down. That is good to hear. Did he have any issues with mobility today?" "He is still very weak, but he managed to walk to the kitchen for a few minutes this afternoon." I thought about the image of John sitting comfortably at the table, looking perfectly normal. "Lindsay, I need to ask you something directly. Is John actually sick, or is he manipulating you?" The silence on the other end stretched for nearly 30 seconds. "Miles, I cannot believe you would even suggest that. John is the father of my children. He would never fake being sick to manipulate me. But would he exaggerate symptoms to get extra attention from you? You are being ridiculous and hurtful." I am hanging up now. Friday morning, I made a decision that would either save our relationship or end it completely. I was going to get the whole truth about John's medical emergency, even if Lindsay didn't want me to know it. What I discovered made me realize I had been engaged to someone who never really divorced her first husband. Update 2. Been dealing with a job site emergency all week, a foundation issue that needed immediate attention. Finally got time to update you guys on what happened next. So Friday morning, I decided to go straight to the source. I called John's doctor's office, claiming to be calling about insurance coverage for his current treatment. "I am sorry, but Mr. Foster doesn't have any current treatment plans or appointments scheduled," the office manager said. "His last visit was 6 months ago for routine blood work. No current treatment, no medical supervision, no doctor involvement in this supposed serious flare-up requiring 24-hour nursing care." At that point, I knew John was playing games, but I needed to understand why Lindsay was going along with it. Friday afternoon, I drove to Tyler and Cameron's school during pickup time. I waited in my truck until I saw Lindsay walk out with the boys. She was laughing at something, Cameron said, looking completely relaxed and happy. Not like someone dealing with a medical crisis. That evening, I asked Lindsay to meet me for coffee. We needed to have an honest conversation about what was really happening. "I cannot leave John right now," she said. "He is still too weak to be alone with the boys." "Lindsay, I know he took vacation time this week, not sick leave. I know he hasn't seen his doctor. I know this isn't the medical emergency you described." She was quiet for a long time. Finally, she said, "Maybe he is feeling better than I initially thought. But that doesn't mean he wasn't sick, or maybe he was never as sick as he claimed. And you are using his condition as an excuse to avoid our wedding. That is not true. Then prove it. Come home tonight. Let John manage his own health like he has been for 2 years, since your divorce. I cannot abandon him when he needs help. You are not abandoning him. You are choosing your fiancé over your ex-husband, which is what healthy people in committed relationships do." She started crying. "Then, you don't understand how complicated this is. John cannot handle stress right now, and if I leave suddenly, it could make his condition worse. Lindsay, listen to yourself. You are talking about managing your ex-husband's emotional state to prevent health problems. That is not your job anymore. You divorced him. But the boys need stability, and if their father gets sicker because I wasn't there to help, that is when I realized the real problem." Lindsay wasn't just helping with John's health, she was still emotionally married to him. She was still making decisions based on his needs and feelings instead of our relationship. Saturday morning, I made one final attempt to save our engagement. I drove to John's house and knocked on the door. If we were going to resolve this, all 3 of us needed to be honest about what was happening. John answered the door, looking perfectly healthy. No signs of illness, no weakness, no mobility issues. "Miles, what brings you by?" He seemed genuinely surprised to see me, but not uncomfortable, We need to talk about your health situation and how it is affecting my wedding. John invited me in. Lindsay was in the kitchen making breakfast, and she looked horrified to see me. Miles, what are you doing here? I am here to get the truth about John's condition so we can make informed decisions about our future. John sat down at the kitchen table, the same spot where I had seen him reading the newspaper 3 days earlier. Look, Miles, I appreciate Lindsay helping out this week. My condition has been acting up, and it is nice having someone around who understands medical stuff. Acting up how? I asked. Joint pain, mostly, some fatigue. Nothing too serious, but enough to make daily tasks more difficult. And you felt this required canceling our wedding. John looked confused. Your wedding's canceled. I turned to Lindsay. You didn't tell him we postponed the wedding to take care of him? Lindsay's face went red. I told him we might need to adjust the timeline. She didn't say anything about canceling, John said. I figured she was just helping out for a few days, like she sometimes does when I am not feeling great. That is when everything clicked into place. John wasn't manipulating Lindsay to cancel our wedding. Lindsay was using John's minor health issues as an excuse to avoid getting married. Lindsay, I said carefully, do you want to marry me? She couldn't answer that question. Lindsay was having second thoughts about marriage, but didn't know how to communicate that directly. When John mentioned feeling under the weather, she saw an opportunity to delay the wedding without having to admit her doubts. I love you, Miles, but I am scared of making another mistake. What if we get divorced like John and I did? What if you decide you don't want to deal with my kids long term? So instead of talking to me about your concerns, you decided to play house with your ex-husband for a week. It wasn't like that. That is exactly what it was like. And John, you knew she was using you to avoid her relationship problems. John had the decency to look embarrassed. I figured if she wanted to take care of me for a few days, who was I to complain? But I never asked her to cancel anything with you. I looked at Lindsay, who was crying at the kitchen table. Do you want to work through your fears about marriage? Or do you want to keep using other people's problems as excuses to avoid commitment? She couldn't give me a straight answer. I walked out of John's house that morning knowing my engagement was over, but finally understanding why it had to be. Final update. It has been 3 months since I called off the wedding, and I figured I should close out this story for anyone who has been following along. After the conversation at John's house, I gave Lindsay 24 hours to decide whether she wanted to work on our relationship or end it. She chose to take a break to figure things out, which was really just a nice way of saying she wasn't ready for marriage. I spent that Sunday calling vendors to cancel everything. Lost about $8,000 in deposits and fees, but it was worth it to avoid marrying someone who was looking for excuses to avoid commitment. Monday morning, I called all our family members to explain that the wedding was canceled due to unresolvable differences. Most people were understanding, especially after I explained that Lindsay had used her ex-husband's minor health issues as an excuse to postpone our wedding instead of discussing her actual concerns about marriage. My mom was supportive. Better to find out now than after you are legally tied together, she said. Lindsay's parents were less understanding. They called me asking if I would reconsider, saying Lindsay was just being responsible about John's health. I explained that John's condition wasn't serious enough to require professional nursing care, and that Lindsay had admitted to using the situation to avoid facing her fears about marriage. They went quiet after that. Over the next month, Lindsay tried to maintain the break fiction, texting occasionally about working on herself and figuring out her priorities. I made it clear that there was nothing to figure out. She had shown me she wasn't ready for marriage when she chose to play house with her ex-husband, instead of talking to me about her doubts. 6 weeks after the canceled wedding, Rex told me he had heard through mutual friends that Lindsay was still spending several nights a week at John's house, helping with the boys' routines. Apparently, she had moved some of her things back into her old bedroom there. 2 months later, Lindsay called asking if we could meet for coffee. I agreed, mostly out of curiosity about what she had to say. She looked exhausted when I saw her. I made a mistake, Miles. I wasn't honest with you or myself about my fears of getting married again. What changed your mind? Living with John again made me realize why we got divorced in the first place. He is not a bad person, but we are not compatible as a couple. And I realized I was using his health issues as an excuse because I was scared of making another commitment that might fail. So you do understand that his condition was never serious enough to cancel our wedding? Yes, John has manageable health issues that flare up occasionally, but nothing that required professional care. I panicked about the marriage and grabbed onto his situation as a reason to delay without having to admit I was scared. She asked if we could try again, maybe go to couples counseling to work through her commitment issues. I told her no. Lindsay, the problem isn't that you had doubts about marriage. The problem is that instead of trusting me enough to discuss your concerns, you chose to use your ex-husband's health as an excuse and moved back in with him. That shows a fundamental lack of trust and communication. But I love you, Miles. I know I handled everything wrong, but my feelings for you are real. I believe you love me, but you are not ready to be in a committed relationship with anyone. You would rather run back to familiar dysfunction than work through challenges with someone new. She started crying then, but I had already made peace with my decision. 3 months later, I am focused on growing my business and dating someone who understands the difference between having concerns and running away from them. Her name's Amanda. She is a project manager for a commercial development company. And when I told her about the wedding situation, she was amazed. If I had doubts about marrying someone, I had talked to them about it, Amanda said. Using your ex-husband's health as an excuse to avoid that conversation is incredibly immature. I heard through Rex that Lindsay tried to make things work with John again, but they broke up after a month. Apparently living together reminded them both why they got divorced. Lindsay moved into her own apartment and is supposedly working on herself in therapy. Tyler and Cameron are doing fine according to mutual friends. The boys were probably confused by all the back and forth, but kids adapt. They are seeing their parents separately again and have a more stable routine. As for me, I am grateful the whole situation happened before the wedding instead of after. Lindsay did me a favor by showing me she wasn't ready for marriage, even if she did it in the most painful way possible. The construction business is booming. Amanda and I are building something solid together, and I sleep well, knowing I chose self-respect over someone who was looking for excuses to avoid commitment.